What is up, fellow thinkers? My name is Nick Troy. This is my first episode of my brand new podcast called Join the Journey. I decided to make this podcast as a sort of reality check for social media. I think there's too much content on social media that shows only the positive. Not saying that positive is wrong, but it gives people a misconception of what their life should really be like, and the struggles that other people go through. I'm trying to shine a light on the monster, so to speak, that a lot of people I think struggle with. And like the title of the podcast says, what I'm doing is I'm bringing you along for my journey. So the intent is, first of all, this podcast was not made as some sort of, I want to blow up on social media, I want to gain a gathering. All this is a way to document my own experience and trials and tribulations that I'm going through. So that way I can go back later and rewatch them. Possibly even like learn something from a perspective I may have had 2 weeks ago that I forgot about. While I'm doing that, I'm hoping that some viewers, if I get any viewers, will actually have a maybe an epiphany, or will actually be helped and guided through some of my experiences and realize that we're not alone. Now, when I say join the journey, I also mean that I have this perception of what success looks like in my life, and my journey chasing success. And I think a lot of people have their own journeys towards success or whatever it may be. But the join the journey is in reference to my journey to success and where I want to be in life, and the trials and tribulations that I think a lot of us go through that nobody talks about, because again, social media just kind of glazes over that. Nobody talks about it. All you see is the good stuff happening on social media. So what this podcast is going to kind of be like is me just talking about my weekly experiences, how I felt, completely candid, no cuts. I mean, maybe cuts and some ums and some boring parts, but no cuts in my content. Not trying to blanket any of the tribulations that I'm going through. Not just showing positivity, but also showing, again, shining the light on the monster, so other people realize that it's you're not alone. Everybody feels this way, and this is how I got through it. So maybe you can get through it in the way that I got through it, or maybe I give you some sort of idea or insight into something that you could possibly be doing to help your journey on planet Earth and getting to the end of it. So, a little background for me. About 2 years ago, I cut out alcohol. Actually, over 2 years ago now, I cut out alcohol. And I feel like as soon as I cut out alcohol, I actually my mind shift started to change a little bit. My mindset, not mind shift. Holy wow! My mindset sort of started to shift a little bit into a more professional tone, into less into what I can do for myself, and more of what can I do to build my future and anybody that's related to me, family, friends, girlfriend, wife, whatever it may be. How can I benefit them as well? So I stopped going to the bar, and I can specifically recall a couple of instances where I started to feel myself wanting to step away from alcohol. If this is a step that you're thinking about taking, this is definitely, this part right here is for you. What I started doing is I was at the bar, and I was friends with the DJ. I used to work at the bars that I used to go to. So I would stand up on the stage, and granted I was drunk myself, but I would look out through the crowd, look at everybody dancing and wasting their life away in a bar, and think to myself, I'm surrounded by people that this is the peak of their life right here. This is it. This is they're living for the weekend. They enjoy going out and getting drunk. And then it occurred to me that those people was me too. I was one of the people that were spending the weekends in the bar and living for the weekend. So it was kind of hard to trash on anybody that I was currently associated with. That being said, I kind of started to fade away from alcohol and drinking a little bit, but then I went out to the bar with my friend slash roommate at the time, and I made an inappropriate comment to one of the bouncers, somebody that I had previously worked with, and that caused me to leave one of the bars that I worked at on kind of a low note with that bouncer. Now, the bouncer's cousin actually worked at the other bar that we were going to. By the time I got there, evidently he had already texted the other bouncer not to let me in because they didn't let me in my bar. I mean, not my bar, but the bar that I worked at. I knew everybody there. That infuriated me. And right as soon as I was about to throw away everything and possibly do something that I would regret later, I made a shitty comment, acknowledged that what I said previously was also shitty, and I walked away. And I remember speaking out loud in that moment, right there, I'm never drinking again. And I remember saying that, and I remember meaning it. I can't describe the feeling that I had, but it was just such certainty that I didn't want to be a part of that crowd of people anymore and the drama that came with it, that I knew that was going to be a thing. And that right there, that moment right there defined the next 2 years of my life, because I'm still sober from that night, from that exact phrase. I didn't take a single drink after that. So that's kind of where I got sober and some of the things that kind of pushed me to get sober. But then about a month into sobriety, I needed to fill my time. And I'm actually going to try and talk a little bit faster through this and get through this, just because I've recorded this. I mean, completely candid, completely honest right now. I've recorded this a few times, and I just kind of I've found, contrary to my previous beliefs, I am not very good at talking for 2 hours straight. I thought that I was, but clearly I'm not. So I'm going to try and rush through this a little bit. Following weeks, I will be going into deeper conversation about the feelings that I've had and the trials and tribulations that I've experienced, because I'm only covering a week. But right now, I'm covering 2 years prior all the way up until now. So unless anybody wants to sit through a 2 hour lecture on talking about myself, I'm going to talk a little bit faster. So, and probably glaze over some of the feelings that I've had and stuff. But like, I think second week into me being sober, I needed to find a way to fill my time with something. So I ended up going to church. And the reason why I got into church is because I just needed a place to meet people and kind of belong. I had no intention on being like a Christian. I had no intention on praying, getting into the gospel, knowing Christ and accepting him into my heart, so on and so forth. No intention on doing any of that. I literally just went to fill my time and possibly take out a positive lesson or knowledge point and apply that to my life, separate from God. So I started going to church, and um, super crazy, but we're gonna step from the the experience that the journey that I started with Christ 2 years ago, and we're just gonna sum it up into one quick sentence, quick little quote that I really like, and that is not really a quote, an analogy that would be better. 2 years ago, I planted a seed. I didn't even realize it. I went to church, and that was planting a seed. I had no intention on getting into the gospel, getting into God, or anything. But I planted this seed, and I started showing up to church. And it's insane what happens when all you do is plant a seed, because I was not consciously working on growing that seed. I wasn't consciously doing anything to further my trust in Christ, my knowledge in Christ, my anything related to God, church, and the Bible. But 2 years passed by now, and I didn't see it, but that seed was slowly growing roots under the ground. And Now I've slowly, I got to the point where I started praying on a regular basis. I got to the point where I was kind of asking him for help and asking for guidance on how to handle certain situations, and it slowly just turned from something that I wasn't actively pursuing to something that was, in this analogy of like the seed started to sprout. I didn't see all the roots underneath, but the seed started to sprout, and I started to notice how it started appearing in my life, in the things that I did and the things that I said. And then slowly but surely, it kind of changed into like a sapling, into like full grown tree. Now I would consider myself a full blown Christian. So that's a lesson in itself to take away. Is what do you think you could use in your life that you might just need to plant a seed in? Drop it in the comments down below if you're watching. To go back to 2 years ago though, so that was my journey into Christ right there. So now, if we get into all my other mindsets and all my other things that I've been doing over the past 2 years, about a month into it, I started getting into computer programming. Computer programming was something that I had touched on briefly in high school. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I was actually one of the best in class. I got to the point where I was um, designing websites that very basic static websites, but other people were sticking with like the HTML and CSS, which is what our course was focused on. It was applied sciences. It was only a brief section in the entire semester that I was taking the course for. But I got into computer science, started building websites, and I started getting into JavaScript, which was a step beyond what we were supposed to do in the course, which was HTML and CSS, and it really intrigued me. So that being said, I got into Java in college. Quickly figured out that I hated computer programming, and dropped it completely. I stopped going to school for it. Fast forward a couple years into, a month into my sobriety, I decided to pick up computer programming again. That's when I realized that JavaScript and Java are two different computer programming languages. JavaScript, while yes, it can be used for backend, is mostly used for front end, and Java is almost strictly a backend language. Also, a lot of people really hate Java, so that's funny in itself. The fact that I didn't even know what Java was, and yeah, no, despise it. Anybody thinking about going into Java, have fun. But I started getting into JavaScript, and my roommate at the time had doubts. He specifically vocalized his doubts and said, "Well, you got to be really smart to do computer programming JavaScript." And for me, that was like an extra push that I really needed, because my whole life I've just kind of been undermined by people, and people think that I'm somehow less intelligent than them or something, just because I've made different life choices. And I loved hearing that, because I was like, yes, this is an opportunity to prove somebody wrong. And so whenever I was having a hard time staying focused on my work, whenever it got a little bit too hard, comments like that from everybody throughout my whole life, but the most recent of being my conversation with my roommate that I had, pushed me to keep pushing further on it. Now, fast forward a few years, I'm not doing computer programming anymore, but every time, and the reason being, let me rewind a little bit. The reason being is because I started pursuing something else. Not in a, I'm jumping from one dopamine fix to another, but from a, this is not logical in where this is going, to keep pursuing it. And sometimes you need to know when to break off from things. And I think this was an appropriate time to break off from it. I learned discipline. I learned the basics of, beyond the basics of computer programming. I would consider myself intermediate. I could build a full functional dynamic website if I needed to. But sometimes you got to branch off to do other things. So that being said, I'm not in computer programming anymore. But every time, and this is where I just kind of got disciplined and just do the work, even if you're not confident it's going anywhere, or just having faith, I guess. would be a better way to put it, is every time I decided, or every time I thought that I wasn't going anywhere with this and I couldn't learn something because it was too hard, or I couldn't memorize something, or the whole task just seemed too big in itself, that I wasn't going to be able to do it, I pushed through it. I did it anyways. I didn't put in a little bit of extra work. And every time I had that doubt about myself, I actually pushed through it and I learned how to do it. So that's a really good principle that I was able to get out of that. I think a lot of us are faced with these mountain tasks, and really all you got to do, and this is such a motivational cliche, but all you got to do is just kind of take one step at a time. Even if you can't see 5 steps ahead of you, even if it seems like an impossible task, you just take one step at a time. And that's what I kind of learned, is even though I can't see those 5 steps ahead of me, I'm going to take that one step, and I might need to turn back around and do something else, but at least I'm making progress. So that's kind of where I got into computer programming, learned a lot about that. And then so I was working at a warehouse at the time. I didn't despise, I wasn't content in the job that I wanted to go into. Um, or that I was in. I wasn't content in the job that I was in. But man, this is hard. This is really hard talking for 2 hours. This is really, it's not 2 hours. That was the original time that I was booking out for this. But this is difficult, talking to 40 minutes at a time to public speakers that speak for hours at a time. Props to you. All right. So I forgot where I left off. Um, but I was working at a job that I wasn't fulfilling to me. But I was working in warehousing, and I noticed through a process of ours that there's something that wasn't being done efficiently, and it was eating up a lot of space, and trash was getting left around everywhere. So I got into something that I think has kind of been inside of me my whole life, but I haven't really noticed it up until recently, is innovation. So I started thinking of a product. In this instance, I have a patent pending on the product, actually, so I have no issue talking about the product, talking about it, and letting other people know about it, because I do have this patent pending. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the prototypes that I have and some of the prototypes that I've printed. I started working with my friend. Her name is Ashley. She's a manufacturing slash process engineer. And then another friend, a mutual friend of ours, and she is a 3D designer for a kids toy company. I think is at least when I started working with her, that's what she was doing. And the product idea that I had in the warehouse is a label dispenser that collects trash at the same time. What I noticed is I was sitting on a high-low, and my cup holder and the place where I kept my clipboard were constantly getting taken up by labels. You have to shift stuff around constantly, drop stuff. I was dropping scanners, dropping clipboards. I saw it on other people's high-lows too. So it seemed like a really big inefficiency and detriment to some of our more expensive tech that we use, like scanners and stuff. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to design a product that dispensed a label for you on a moving piece of equipment like a forklift, and collect the label waste in itself. That way you didn't have a bunch of trash lying anywhere and taking up a bunch of your space. So all in one, you have something that's mountable, you have something that collects labels, or you have something that stores label waste, and then you have something that takes away the roll of labels sitting in your cup holder, your clipboard spot, and the trash isn't sitting in those either. So what we did is we started designing. We met up a couple of weekends and we started designing the first prototypes. So this one was our first prototype. It came out garbage. I don't know if you can see it in the cameras this distance away, but it came out garbage. We ended up having to switch to a different plastic, different temperature of a print or something like that. can't tell you exactly what we did with it. But then we moved to this prototype where we tried using some magnets to mount it. That didn't work, so we grabbed some stronger magnets. That worked, but it was just it was a little wobbly. So the original design was, if I can get this out, have a trash can in the middle, and then a platform, a roll in here that you could roll out the labels through here, tear it, take the labels off on your high-low, and label your pallets. So we took a lot of what we learned from that prototype and printed this one. This one, same design. We ended up increasing the amount of label space that you could use, which decreased the amount of trash that you could fit in, which was a product flaw in itself. And we made magnet holes for the bigger size magnets. That being said, this prototype was also subpar. So we decided to switch up completely on how these things were dispensed because they weren't dispensing and tearing correctly. And as you can see, this prototype didn't work out because it's broken half. But what we moved to is it was about this big right here. And what would happen, first of all, we had two walls right here. So you could throw away your label waste through the side, mount it with a strap on the back because the magnets weren't holding on strong enough, or they were, but they weren't stable. They were holding, but they weren't stable. And then you'd fill in the labels from the top, dispense them through this little patch right here that I glued on here as a prototype, and then with a little razor on this front spot. That also didn't work out. Beyond the fact that it snapped in half, it didn't work out. You also had a removable trash can, so it could stay mounted. You just put a garbage can underneath it and dispense it. So that's when I moved away to North Carolina, which I will get into in this episode of the podcast and my decision to do so. And when I got to North Carolina, I started working with a professional company rather than working with friends that were operating off of goodwill and free time. A company that I could give an idea to, and they could help me design it and get this cranked out in a couple of months versus a couple of years, which is what we took to do all those previous prototypes. So this is my first prototype that I got back from the people that were helping me with this. This is ideally what I'm market testing right now, checking to see what can be improved upon it and what market feedback is going to be. Is this a viable product? Are people going to buy this, or do I need to make modifications to make it a viable product? So what you do, you twist this handle right here. I'm not going to demonstrate it actually. I do have a patent pending, but the idea of it is you dispense a label, collect it, and then it feeds in through here, collects the label. That's a really high overview on what the product does without going into it and risking my IP going public without me. Hope you can understand. But that's what resparked my innovative mindset, my creative mindset, and realizing that society kind of dampens a lot of that creative output. So North Carolina. That's where I got to get to. So at the time of doing a lot of this stuff, I was watching Andrew Tate videos, watching Justin Waller videos, a lot of motivational, kind of like grind, hustle is what it's called. I might need to censor out that word. But I was watching a lot of Andrew Tate, Justin Waller, Luke Belmar, people like that. And one thing that I heard from at least Tate brothers was that society really pushes hard for having a girlfriend, settling down, owning a house, because you're not able to chase opportunity in the same way if you're hunkered down to one space as you were if you were single, not bound to a location through a house, and could move on a whim. So that's when I made the decision to sell the house that I had and move down to North Carolina. Now that move in itself was a headache, and I took a lot of lessons out from moving down, but I made the decision right then and there to renovate my house by June 30th, I think it was. And this was in April, so that was 2 or 3 months away, and I had to renovate my whole house, except for one, no, that one room too. So I completely tore apart my house and started working on it. Through the process, I was still going to the gym, still working a 9 to 5, and getting burnt out on all ends, but I had a deadline to meet. So what I decided to do, and this is where I learned another big principle that I apply in my life, is singular focus helps drive success. So if you're not focusing on 5 different things at once and you focus on one single thing and work towards that, the chances of that succeeding, rather than if you're focusing on 5 things at one time, is a hell of a lot higher. And so I started I started I still went to the gym, but it wasn't as often. I worked my 40 hours. I didn't try to work any more than that. And I was singularly focused to getting my house renovated to sell by June 30th because I really wanted to move here to North Carolina, as the previous CEO of the company that I had worked for prior to the one that I was working for now suggested that North Carolina was a really good area because it's growing, it's booming. There's a lot of tech happening down here, tech growth happening down here, and steered me towards North Carolina. But it lines up with what I want here, so I ended up coming down to North Carolina, or settling on North Carolina, and um, halfway through this process of renovating my house, I had a family vacation planned with my parents and my sisters. So we went down to Florida, and I learned there's three major perspective changes that happened in Florida. One was, if I can remember correctly, and I should be able to remember these, but one of the major perspective changes was um, life, or has always been kind of a vacation spot, a tourist spot, kind of a world away from Michigan, like this glorious area for me to go on a vacation to. So I've never viewed it as a place to live, and I've never viewed any place other than Michigan as a place to live. Um, but Florida specifically, I went there, and for the first time, I was kind of exposed to a non-touristy area. Touristy, yes, but not as nearly as much as the other areas that I've been to. So I it changed my perspective from a touristy place that people go to work at bars and restaurants, and that's really it, to okay, there's genuine businesses down here. There's people living their lives down here. Like, this has opened up my view on the world, honestly, not just Florida. One of the other things that really changed my perspective, and in the same token, is that we went on a kayak tour, and the kayak guide got paid to give kayak tours. He made his living off of kayak tours. All day, every day, take a kayak, go out on the ocean or the Gulf of Mexico, and give tours on animals, the wildlife, the area. It was so eye opening to me that somebody could make a living off of something that they genuinely enjoyed, and something that to me is a fairy tale. That it made me realize that I could do anything in life. It really didn't. I didn't need to be stuck in my bubble here in Michigan, or there in Michigan, and work a manufacturing job the rest of my life. I can find ways to make money and live where I can afford, below my means, and live a life of fulfillment, not just box, pallet, box, pallet, box, pallet, ship, box, pallet, so on and so forth. It's what really opened up my eye to the possibility of doing other things. So then that leads me to the third life changing perspective that I had in Florida. When I was down in Florida, I got a call from my boss, and I was like, "Oh, great! What do they need? I'm on vacation." got a call from my boss, and he told me that one of my close coworkers, I would consider her a friend of mine, had passed away at, I think, like 50 years old or something. Super, super nice lady. Still a little torn up about it. But the point of that being was that anybody can pass away at any time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how good you're doing. It can happen at any point. And I think that's a lesson that a lot of people learn fairly early on. But I don't know. It kind of I feel like it hit different for me. It was like a life changing perspective that made me realize like I need to act on this stuff right now. I can't just hope to do it next week, or I can't keep pushing stuff off to next week. Like I need to do things now. So that takes me on my Florida trip. The three perspectives that changed my life down there, and that gets me back to renovating my house. So renovations were going good. I ended up meeting my deadline again, singularly focused, driven towards one goal, not distracting myself with other things. And me and my dad ended up taking a trip down to North Carolina, where I now live, to scout out an area. And that's, if anybody's thinking about moving to an area, let me tell you now, it's a crapshoot. I thought I had 3 or 4 different apartment complexes lined up for where I wanted to live, based off of what I was seeing online. And I got here to take a look at them, and they were total crapshoots. Not crapshoots. They were total garbage dumps. I didn't like them at all. So my whole plan was derailed when I got down here. Among that, I didn't have any job interviews down here. So I threw in 7 different job applications, went and followed up the next day with a bunch of them. I ended up getting a job interview that I did the day prior, or the day following. I nailed the job interview. It seemed like I had something lined up down here, but I left North Carolina on our scout trip without a job, and I left without a place to live. I had an idea of a place that I wanted to live, but it was a little bit outside of the budget that I was looking in. So I left North Carolina, our scout trip, where I was supposed to figure everything out, and I left with no extra information than I had come here with. Like, 1 second. I think my cat's snoring right now. Anyways, so that's when I figured out, came down to North Carolina, left with nothing. Um, no more information. Actually, technically more information, but I had less of an idea. I had more of an idea of what I wanted to do, less of a plan, I guess. And it finally, the sale of my house finally came to fruition, and I accepted a deal. Yes, I accepted a deal shortly after I got back, and that's when the the closing process was underway, and the sale of my house was on the horizon. We got through the renovations, flipped it, didn't get exactly what I wanted out of it, but for what I paid for it, I made money off of the house, off of the sale of the house. So all of my efforts had paid off. I ended up finding a place to live down here. One of the job applications that I put in while I was down here asked me for an interview, and they were willing to work with me through video interviews and everything, to the point where everything was getting lined up. And um, I mean, it wasn't an easy process. I fought and I fought and I fought with the apartment complex that I eventually settled on, because they were not super responsive on the phones. They weren't that they I would send in documents through their portal. They'd call me 2 days later and ask me if I put in those documents, tell me that it was showing that I didn't, and I did, and then I'd have to send it again. So 2 or 3 times I was sending in documents, not able to contact them over the phone to try and get some questions answered. It was a hell of a process to try and get down here, but I finally, the day came where it was my last day in Michigan, and I couldn't sleep. I We were supposed to leave at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday, and it was 9 o'clock on Tuesday night, and I could not sleep. I had everything packed, U-Haul ready to go. Me and my parents, my dad was driving the U-Haul. I was driving my car down there with my cat in my car. 9 o'clock rolled around, and I said, "Dad, I'm just gonna leave. I need to go. I can't sleep. I'm if I'm not gonna sleep, I just want to get started on the road already." And he was like, "Okay, give me an hour, and we can get going." And so we started driving. It kind of felt funky the whole like half the way half the drive down there, and then second half, I started to get sick. It was bad. It got so bad that I had to pull off on the side of the road. I thought I was gonna hurl. I didn't end up hurling, but we pulled off into a gas station. I sat over a toilet for a few minutes, thinking that I was sick, and it was just kind of a rough start to my trip down to North Carolina, especially since we hadn't even been down to North Carolina yet. And now I'm sick on the drive down there. It just kind of felt like, you're in these spaces of high stress and high doubt, and these things start happening, and you start to wonder, is what I'm doing right or not? And there was so much negative happening at that time where I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not sure I should be going down here right now. I mean, kind of too late, but I'm not sure how I feel about this. And turned out that the next day I ended up getting a test, and I tested positive for COVID. So that explained that. And I spent the first 4 days of my time here in North Carolina with my parents still in town, mind you, in bedridden, which really, really sucked, especially since I was bedridden the whole time they were here. We didn't really spend too much time together. I took them to the airport when we were all done because they were using my car, and then I was left down here alone, sick. And that was the first 4 days of my trip down here, or my time down here. That being said, I am so happy I moved down here. So we're getting more into the present, and I don't know how long it's been already. I'm looking at the clock right now, but I'm gonna try and wrap this up shortly here and summarize the 3 months that I've been down here. Again, every following episode will be just a recap over the week, rather than a 2-year catch up on where I'm at, my progress to success. But I came down here, started my job, and kind of, I guess, just to touch base on what we have been through so far. My mindset shift throughout this whole move and this whole process of my journey to success. It happens, at least for me, it happens unconsciously. And there's a quote that I really like. I think it's a quote by Justin Waller that says, the work works on you more than you work on the work. So all the time that I was spending on my computer programming, all the time that I was spending on my invention here that I wanted to bring to market, even though those things didn't work out, or I mean, this might still work out, we'll see. But even though computer programming didn't work out, the more I was working on the work was working on me more than I was working on the work. Exactly. So I was seeing more character development just from working than my work was gaining from me working on it, if that makes any sense. I'm trying to break it down. But that was it's a big quote that I kind of try and focus on in life, because you can't get too disappointed when something doesn't work out. You just have to realize that so long as you're working, so long as you're putting genuine effort in something, you're learning something, you're gaining something. Maybe it's not monetary, maybe it's not financial, but you're gaining something. And since I've been down here, I joined a cigar lounge. I've met with millionaires, I've met with founders, I've met with people that are in contact with billionaires. I've met a wide variety of successful people that I'm taking advice from and learning from. And these are opportunities that would have never happened in Michigan had I not tried to make this move. I'm learning about investing. I'm learning about raising capital, and I'm gonna roll off some phrases here. You guys can all. I'm not gonna go deep into what all of these mean. You can look into it yourself if you want to, and I would highly recommend you do. But I'm learning about SPVs, what a hedge fund is versus venture fund versus yeah, hedge fund, venture fund. I'm sure there's more that I'm forgetting about. What a limited partner is, what a general partner is, what an SPV is. I think I already said that. SPV, what a it's been a while since I've touched on some of these terms. MOUs, what an MOU is, term sheet, proposals, how to write up investor decks, how to write up pro forma financial models, how to better utilize Excel, how to do market research. I'm just the amount of stuff that I've learned down here, and I didn't even know that I needed to learn this stuff. Like this is all. There's a term that's been kind of thrown around in the circles that I've been hanging around more so than anything else. You don't know what you don't know, and I didn't know what I didn't know. All of the stuff that I'm learning now, I had no idea I needed to learn it, but I learned it just by surrounding myself with people that knew where I wanted to go. And that kind of leaves me with where I'm at right now, where I think it was like 3 weeks ago, I had been working hard towards launching my product to market without actually having manufacturing up and running, just trying to raise money through pre-sales to get the manufacturable product up and running, working with investors to try and get some money raised. And my whole world came tumbling down when three of my mentors all told me at the same time, like, hey, this process that you're trying to do right now probably isn't going to work realistically. You're not going to have a lot of customers and investors that are willing to put money in something that's not already generating income, not already, maybe not income, not generating revenue yet. And that's when my whole world fell apart. And I started having to rebuild the process that I'm doing. And I'm still, even now, and this is one of the things that I'm going to get into on episodes, is I'm going through a lot of trials and tribulations right now and trying to figure out where to go from here. And I want to be candid with that stuff. I want to be open with it. And I want to be open with my feelings about this stuff. And following episodes, I'll go into how I feel and how I felt the week of and what I've learned. I'm already kind of extending my time right now, but um, yeah, no, the past 2 weeks, my whole world is flipped upside down, and all I can focus on is that same. Alcohol has looked really good to me. Alcohol has looked really tempting. The idea of giving up has crossed my mind. Just to put that into perspective, the thought of throwing everything away that I've worked on to just move back to Michigan, move in with mom and dad, make some money, and then buy another house and settle in Michigan. That thought has crossed my mind, and just the idea of wanting to be multimillionaire slash billionaire, doubt has surrounded me on that. Doubt is consuming my life right now, and I'm not saying that as a pity party, and I'm not saying it to be negative. I'm saying it because I'm sure there's people out there that relate with that think, what the hell is the purpose of this? I'm working and I'm working and I'm working and I'm not seeing any results. And I want to bring it back to two things. The work works on you more than you work on the work. And it doesn't matter if you can't see 5 steps ahead of you, take the first step. That's all you got to do. Doesn't matter if you can see 2 steps ahead of you. Just make the next right move and it'll compound in something greater. And while yes, I've had my doubts, like I'm trying to stay focused on just that next step, just figuring out what I need to do next. Even if it's spending, I was working four or 5 hours a day on getting my product ready to launch to market. And now I am lucky to spend 5 minutes on my computer. But the point being is that I'm still trying to spend 5 minutes. I'm still trying to, I'm still working towards trying to spend an hour on my computer figuring out what I need to do next, just because it's all about just figuring out. It's all about just taking the next step, even if it's tiny little step. And I love this analogy, and it's an analogy. Maybe I made it up. Maybe I'm paraphrasing from somebody else, but it doesn't matter if you're sprinting or if you're crawling in the mud. So long as you're moving forward, you can't not be successful. And that's what I'm doing right now. Is I'm crawling through the mud. I'm trudging through the mud, quite literally trudging. I was sprinting, now I'm trudging. I'm just trying to continue making good decisions, even if I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, even if I don't see how I could possibly turn this around. Just keep taking small little steps, just trudging through the mud to get where I want to go to. So that being said, we're all caught up, kind of. I glazed over some stuff, and I'm sure what will happen is there's going to be stuff that I talk about on future episodes that I'll probably refer back to in some of my previous experiences, some stuff that I've glazed over the past 2 years. I'll definitely be getting more into how I felt during the process, what I've been doing, some of the thoughts that I've had, doubts, triumphs among trials and tribulations, because I don't want it. This is not meant to be negative at all. This is meant to be both sides of the spectrum, both the positive and the negative, and get a more candid view on um, more candid view on success, I guess, and all of our paths that we want to take throughout life, and hoping again that somebody gets something out of it, but more important for me to see where my mindset goes and how my mind works and how this journey goes for me to look back on. That's really all I got for you. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate you listening. I hope that somebody gets something out of it, and I hope that you continue to listen, not for my sake, but if you can take one thing out of what I say to help you feel like you're not the only one, or help relate to me, or even help spark an idea to get out of a pit that you're in yourself, I would love that. And again, kind of to be able to relate to somebody on this level, and have a candid view on a person's journey, not just, this person wrote a hit song and they were successful, their exponential growth from there. They're multimillionaires now and awesome sauce. Like, I want to go into the story before that happens. I want people to know where I came from before that happens. And this is just a way to track that, and a way to document the path that you have to undergo before the success happens. So I hope you all enjoyed, fellow thinkers. I'll catch you next time.